Travel Podcast. I'm Michael Taylor, Senior Managing Director of Travel Hospitality Retail at JD Power, and I'm joined as always by Andrea Stokes, who's our practice lead for the hospitality practice. Hello, Andrea.
Hello.
And of course, at this time of year, just before Thanksgiving, which is when we're recording this, actually the week of Thanksgiving, everybody in the media has the same question for me, and I'm sure you get the same questions, Andrea, as what does the holiday travel season look like? So from the hospitality side of things, Andrea, what does the 23 holiday travel season look like?
Yeah, so, of course, on the hotel side, occupancy does decline over the Thanksgiving holiday period, just, due to the fact that many folks are staying with family and friends if they do travel. And of course, a lot of people do stay home over the holiday weekends. So I think the prediction for occupancy is around 50%, which, is quite a bit lower than your average week, which I think right now is kind of hovering around 62%. So it's, hotels definitely are less crowded this time of year. But I know the industry does ramp up in December, of course, approaching the holidays in December, and hotels do get a lot busier. So, and now is the time when many hotels are have special events around the holidays, right? They want to bring people into the properties, so they might have brunches or different events for families and that kind of thing. So it is an opportunity, I think, for even locals to visit hotel properties during the holiday period. Even if they're not staying there, they can, certainly still go to hotels and enjoy some of the events that they have going on. I know we as a family, we like to do that. We have some hotels in the DC area that do, holiday events around Thanksgiving and the Hanukkah and Christmas holidays, which are really, really fun. So,
and does this happen at business hotels, or is it just the residential type of hotels or leisure travel hotels that do this kind of special events?
That's a great question. I, tend to see this in upper upscale hotels, sometimes luxury hotels. Of course, those higher end hotels do great, fabulous decorations. They have restaurants, of course, where they can host holiday parties or have special events around, food and beverage, right? And it's a good opportunity for hotels to, bring in revenue that way. And so, I do tend to see this in, I would say, higher end full service hotels. And, the good thing is that because of these events, it not only brings in revenue, right, from, perhaps locals coming to the hotel, but folks booking rooms to just enjoy the hotel property and enjoy the holiday events that are going on.
Do they book hotel rooms to get away from annoying relatives during the holiday?
Yeah, I'm sure that's some of it, and I do think a lot of people in their local area, it's just a staycation, right? It's a way to sort of get out of the house for a couple of days, even if it's in your local area. But you can still enjoy, the sort of the holiday festivities that way.
Well, that's interesting. I know I'm tempted sometimes to want to book a hotel room to get away from, because we always have the entire family over at our house every year. Sure. Yeah, so it's not so bad, except for the shocking price of turkey this year. I went and bought I bought a fresh turkey this morning, and I was just kind of shocked at how much per pound it was. And I'm like, oh, well, it's a good thing that I'm having only a dozen people coming over this year. So anyway, but it is amazing how much the price of turkey has gone up. So on my study side of things, which are the airport and the airline side of things, we're actually currently in the travel period that TSA looks at every year and forecasts every year, which is, a couple weeks or a week or so before the Thanksgiving holiday. So it started on the 17th and it'll end on the 29th. And they're expecting that 30 million people will be traveling during that period. Now, not all 30 million are leisure travelers, not all going to see, Grandma Taylor. But they're, a good portion of them are. One of the more strange or surprising rules of thumb that I'm always amazed that people have an idea that, in an airport, it's probably half to 60% business travelers. It's actually not at all. Usually in any time frame you look at, about 70% of the people flying or running or going through the airport are traveling on their own dollar, as a leisure trip. And that percentage has been higher since COVID stopped. And things like this, things that we're doing right now, virtual meetings are much easier to do. But of course, the proportion goes really high, because no one wants to do any business over the holiday period. But we're currently in the middle of it. 30 million passengers are predicted by TSA. And the all-time highest day is going to be forecast as well. I believe it's going to be the 28th is what they're forecasting based on bookings through airlines, that we're going to have something around 3-something million people traveling on a day. 3.9 million, I think, is the forecast number, which is a huge uptick from a normal particular day of going through throughput. So, and by now you probably already got your tickets set. And if you're traveling on the 28th, just gird yourself for battle, because it is going to be quite a bit of waiting wherever you're going, getting into the airport, getting through TSA, and getting to the gate itself. So, but they are predicting an all-time high this year that total travel will be up by 9% versus last year. And at least looking at the numbers that we track at JD Power on the airport side of things, the airport will be a slightly more inviting place than it was last year, because there's a higher percentage of stores, retail establishments, as well as food and beverage, and especially coffee. There'll be more of those open to people traveling, and they'll be open longer. They did have obviously a hiring problem for a good long time, and now they've relatively solved that problem. I wouldn't say it's always solved. Turnover at the airport is really always very high for labor. So it's always a problem, but it's less of a problem than it was last year. So people will be able to get a cup of coffee a little bit better. They'll be able to sit down to a meal if that's what they want to do. And if you're traveling with children, it's really important to actually have them something to do while they're waiting for that flight to take off. Of course, feeding them is one of those things that you actually get the child to actually stay in their seat to do. So it'll be a slightly better experience. However, when you get on the aircraft, it is going to be as crowded as it has been the entire year. There won't be as many, at least the projection isn't, and we're seeing the same thing in the JD Power numbers. There'll be not as much of a projected cancellation as we had last year. We had some weather issues. We had a middle of the country snowstorm last year. So far, none of that's projected as well. And that has, of course, the biggest impact on people traveling cross country. But it appears like Mother Nature is going to cooperate this year, and we won't have too much of a problem. At least it's not as big as it was last year. So more people. Record-setting numbers of people, a little bit better experience. But once you get on the aircraft, it is going to be crowded. You're going to hear that familiar announcement. We're completely sold out on this flight today. There's not a seat available. So please, put things in the overhead as quickly as you can and get out of the aisle. Thank you very much. So, which is always the pet peeve with me, that it takes people so long to get out of the aisle once they put their overhead into their bag into the overhead bin. So that's just a personal observation of mine. So, Andrea, what else are you seeing for the holiday travel season?
Yeah, so I think you're saying, Mike, more people, more services available in airports, which is great. I probably would say not lower prices. What do you think?
That's true. I mean, the prices of, the forecast prices have come down a little bit for advanced bookings on airlines, but that's not nearly what it was in 2019. So if you last traveled in 2019, you're going to be shocked how much more you're going to pay to get an airline ticket. It's a good 20 to 30% higher on average. And, it was 25 to 35% higher last year. So it's still higher than pre-pandemic travel was, and it was leveled off a little bit. And on the rental car side of things, it's only up by like $2 a day. It's on average costing about $90 a day in most leisure markets for a typical rental car. And pre-pandemic, that number was in the high 70s, like $78 or $79 a day. But it didn't, it ramped up really quickly during the just post-COVID period when people were really itching to travel and they had a shortage of cars, and they were taking advantage of it. Let's say taking advantage of it. I mean, they're in the business of renting cars, and people want to pay a lot of money for renting cars, so they're going to charge it. But that's backed off a little bit, which means satisfaction with the rental car is a little bit better, and the availability of cars is a little bit better. So you will probably be able to get that minivan or SUV that you had intended, that you are reserving, whereas in previous 2 years it might have been iffy, depending on when you got to the rental car facility, if you actually got the actual rental car that you wanted. The other thing is there will be some surprise EV rentals. That'll still going to be happening. And for those of you who've never heard that expression, it's when someone reserves a gas-powered car, but instead is handed the keys to an EV. And if they're not familiar with EVs, and depending on where they're going to travel, that can cause some issues with logistics. You have to plan, obviously, to recharge the car, and that takes a little bit of planning, a little bit of forethought, versus there's a local gas station every 5 miles or so in most suburban areas, and every 40 or 50 miles in the less urban areas. And so you do have to be very aware that you might be handed the keys to an EV, and it would behoove you if you have reserved a mid-sized car or smaller, that might happen to you. So be prepared to handle an EV. If you get it, especially in more of the major metropolitan areas. You're not necessarily going to get one out in Wyoming or in Arizona. And then there's cold weather issues to think about as well. So they don't have as many EVs out there for rent. But if you're going to an urban area, say like Boston or Miami or Chicago, then you might get handed the keys to an EV rather than a gas-powered car. And just be prepared for that. So that's what we're seeing, is slightly higher prices, not as high as not as big a ramp up as we've seen in the last 2 years, but it is going to be more expensive, Andrea. So I think that we probably reached the end of this particular podcast. So I want to thank everybody for listening. And, our next podcast will be, as our typical year-end podcast will be a prediction of what's going to happen in 2024 in the travel space, which will be equally as exciting as our previous predictions have been. There's been still a lot of changes going to go on in 2024. So you want to make sure that you tune in for that one. And I want to thank Andrea Stokes for helping us out with this podcast. And I want to thank Dan Sharp and Sarah Baggett, who produced this. And we will see you in December for our forecast show. Thank you very much.